Welcome back to the third session of our pansy painting. Today we will bring these beautiful flowers to life with wet on dry details. We will create some beautiful line work right within these dark sections of each pansy petal. Then we will take time to add the minute details to the center of these pansies that will give them a stunningly realistic look. Let's go ahead and get started. Right, so for getting my purple the way I want it, I could maybe just use what I have here in my palette. This is the purples that I had made with my phthalo blue and quinacridone rose. And I have the more bluish purple, the one that's a little more reddish purple over here. And then over here I had my purple made with my ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose. So this palette has more of the ultramarines, this one has some of the phthalos. And then of course I had some of these muddy colors here as well. And I'm kind of wondering if I'm gonna want something in between, like maybe something that's got purple with just a hint of the yellow in it. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take one of these as my springboard into making a kind of a black purple. So I can just bring over some of the purple from over in these palettes into here and just see what I get. And yes, I didn't really moisten them much. That's the way that, it's just the beauty, I think, of using M-gram paint is it kind of stays that little bit moist. And so if you want something super concentrated, you can just pretty much go into it with a wet brush and you're good to go. But let's see what color I've got here. I actually kind of like that even just the way it is. That was just a muddy color, and you can really make that by using your primaries, and it's, as you can see, it's almost a black purple. But I will have to see for sure when I put it on my page. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and start with this pansy right here. This one, I'm going to have to be cautious with my details that I don't overdo them because they are, as I said, close to the edge of the page. And so we don't want to draw a ton of attention to the edge, even though I would say this pansy in itself kind of draws attention just based on its shape. Let's go ahead and start in this one right here. So I've got a smaller brush to start with. I might be able to go up to a larger size, but I've got my palette here. And I'm just going to get my brush nice and wet with my paint and go ahead and try and get some of these little lines going a little bit stronger. And in this case, because I want to avoid the appearance of things being too hard-edged, just being closer to the edge of the paper, I may blend it out with water a little bit. But I'm going to just start by getting some of these lines in here nice and deep and dark with my dark purple here. And then I'll go from there. So I might just almost fill this in, especially as I come up into here. And that's looking really pretty, but I am going to blend it out a tiny bit just because these lines are looking a little bit harsh. So I've got a soft brush here and I'm just going to gently, add a little bit of water and blend it out. So I've got water on this brush. Why don't I do that again today? I'll try and keep my orange brush for the water. It's also slightly, this orange brush is slightly softer because it is a blend of sable and synthetic. So I kind of like the softness. You can definitely get some brushes that are just as soft with being fully synthetic as well. So you don't have to use a blend if you don't want to. So going back and forth between my paint and my water just to kind of get that how I want it. I'm happy with that, I think. So I'm going to go ahead, do the same thing here, and I'll probably blend this one out just even a little tiny bit more, again, because we're getting closer to the edge of the paper, as I've mentioned. But I'm going directly on the paper while the paint, or well, I should say I'm going directly on the paper with my paint, and I'm not wetting it first. I'm wetting it a little bit after just to get it to kind of blend around. So I'm definitely getting harder edges. This is a dry on dry technique, and in this case we're kind of just softening our wet on dry technique. And I'm softening the edges with water so that it's not quite as harsh. But let's go down here. And I'm being a little bit more cautious sometimes with my lines. You can have a little bit of a swing still in your arm or your motion here, but I'm being a slight bit more cautious just because the way I get these lines is going to be the way that I'm going to be pretty much leaving them. Yes, I can, kind of wash them out if I don't like them, but some of these I almost want to leave as is. So in this case, just be a little bit more cautious of that. And to get really fine lines, a small brush is helpful. And part of it has to do with your pressure. If you're using the very tip of the brush, you'll get better lines than if you just kind of apply too much pressure, you'll end up with fatter lines. makes sense because the brush won't, you'll be using all the bristles versus just the bristles of the tip. And you want to pay attention again, of course, to your line direction. I'm liking that. You just have to blend that out, as I said, because I'm getting, this is definitely drawing attention to itself over here, and I don't like that. So water. Because I don't care if these are a little bit of a harder line, I don't have to work quite as fast as say I did when I was working completely wet on wet, where I was wanting a lot of softness. These ones can have a bit more hardness, even though I'm trying to blend them out. So keep that in mind. You don't have to be quite as fast about your re-wetting, if that makes sense. Now I kind of went one stroke here that I don't quite like, but that's okay. It's not too noticeable. Things get a little bit heavier, just kind of more towards the center here. So I'm going to just come in a little bit more. And I think I'm going to call that good for that one. We can always come back in later if we decide it needs a little bit more work, but it's a little moist right now. So let's go ahead and move our way around the painting. Do I want any hard lines up here? Not much. Maybe what I'll do is just go in, because that's very bright up there. You know what? I'm going to grab my purple that's not as dull. So I'm going to grab, I think the one I was using last time, which is kind of dry here, but this is the one that had more ultramarine blue in it. I'm going to grab that and do it up here because I'm seeing a little more intensity. And I know I muted my colors from what they were in the reference anyways, but I'm like, you know what? I think I want a little bit more intensity in those lines and to blend them out more because they're not as harsh up here. So again, apply the paint directly to the paper and then come in with water and just soften it. And at my brush, when I'm softening, it is fairly dry or on the damp side. You don't want to be like flowing with water. Why don't we go ahead and work on this shape here? It's got some nice hard lines in it as well. I want to pay attention to my direction. Ooh, I've got a lot of paint on my brush there. Again, you can always just do this on the side of your palette, kind of like so. The other thing you can do, as I've mentioned, is to squeeze the ferrule of your brush so that you're dabbing out some of the moisture, but less of the pigment by dabbing it off down there. And I'm taking a little bit more of a calculated move as I do these. I'm not being quite as free. Just because once I get these on there, I'm hoping they can stay. I'm hoping I don't have to wipe them out. I actually kind of think I could have got by with a little bit more purple over here, you know that? I might just take the lazy route and just do a line here and then kind of rub it out with my paint brush, my wet paint brush. I know that's not exactly the purple we were using. I might have to come in with a bit of the ultramarine blue. We'll see. Again, I keep kind of dabbing my brush off on my paper towel as I do this. I want it to be relatively clean, my water brush that is, to be relatively clean almost all the time, unless I'm intentionally moving that paint around. It's just something that comes over time. You're going to go, okay, I need to wipe my brush in this situation. In this situation, all I need to do is dry it without washing it. It's one of those things you'll get the hang of. When to wash versus just dab your brush off, if that makes sense. Just softening things a bit here. I don't want them to be too harsh. I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to put a little bit more down here. Again, partly because it's so dark. All right, let's go ahead and do the one over here now. I'm going to try and move myself around the painting, but as I've said before, you can always move your painting whatever direction you need to move it to be able to access your work in a way that's comfortable for the strokes you need to make. It's actually, it can be really convenient sometimes to just turn your painting upside down, depending on what you're trying to do or achieve. There's a lot of lines. I almost, in this case, on this particular petal, again, I'm almost wondering if I would have liked to put a little bit more purple underneath to start with. I'm noticing there's a lot of light shining through here, but I'll see. Once I get this on, I can somewhat create that effect with these fine lines as well, just kind of filling it in kind of closer into this section here. But if need be, I can always use a damp brush or even my ultramarine blue, or I should say the purple made with the ultramarine blue if I need to kind of get things a little more intense here, because as you know, I made a dull purple for doing this, so it's not as ideal to kind of fill this section in with it. Now some of these, I like what I did here. I have some of my little veins almost like branching off a little bit, so I'm going to try and achieve that here. I like that look. Ooh, a little bit sloppy there, Jessica. It's better to err on the side of less and then come back in after too, rather than like go too crazy with these lines. You know what I'm going to try? I'm going to try and take a little risk here and put a little bit of that other purple, the one with the ultramarine blue, because I really feel like it could get filled in a little deeper and darker here, but I want it to be that smidgen bit intense, I think. So just doing some of these strokes, again, imagining I'm almost on the layer beneath, but I can get away with it because of the way this is working here. I'm also going to use this color to kind of clean up what I did here, because I feel like I did a little bit of sloppiness along the edge of this little fuzzy piece. Come in and try and fix that. Now I will say I am getting a lot more of the bluish purples going in here than what the reference photo has. So if you want to make your purples that you're using in this stage just a little bit more on the pinky side, you can definitely do that as well. This section does actually feel dry enough that I think I can work in it, but to make sure it is, if you've done any messing around like I did here, make sure you're dry enough before you jump in there. And I'm going to probably use a bit more of my purplish red to get that transition, something I'm a little bit happier with. So I'm getting my purple from last time that was kind of the most red of any of them. And I'm going to do a little bit of the brush stroke stuff happening here. I'm working wet on dry still, but I'm doing a little bit more of the thing I was doing last time, where I'm just getting a little bit of these broad strokes in first, and then I'll come in and probably do a little bit more calculated movement. Actually, you know what? I might just turn these into, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just turn these into my stronger veins. It's really not as scary as I'm making it sound. Like I'm like feeling like I want to make sure I hit everything just perfect the right time at the first time around. But really, there's no reason you have to be worried, because you can just keep wiping it out, right? You've seen me do that already today. So as much as I'm kind of trying to take it more cautiously, you can definitely correct things still. Again, I dipped into my more purple color for this. I don't know, I was starting to feel like I was getting a little too blue in general, so I might go and fix my muted purple that I made today and even add a little more of our quinacridone rose to it. We'll see. Just feel like I'm getting a bit more blue than I'd like to be. I don't know, I seem to be leaning more to the blue side, even though I do like the purples that are on the red side, so go figure. But it's still pretty. If I really cared a lot, I would make that decision right now to switch my purple, but I'm liking overall. I just am noticing kind of blue. Okay, so I'm going to go back and forth now between the different purples, depending what I want to add to this one. So right now I've got the more neutral one, and I feel like I've gone a little bit harsh with some of these lines, kind of especially up here, but I might wait and wipe them out, or not even wipe them out, just control them a little bit more in our next, in a minute here, because if I add water right now, I might blur them out too much. So I think I better just don't think about adding water. Just let them be a little harsh. You know what? I might even decide at the end I like them that harsh, but if I don't, I'd rather not hit them with water yet, because I just have a feeling if I do so, I'm just going to make everything go everywhere and I will lose the definition I have achieved. All right, I just went ahead and dried the shapes I've just finished, not because they're going to bleed into each other, but just because I was worried my hand was going to dip into them and make a mess. So if you ever feel like as you're working that you need to dry things just to kind of keep yourself from smudging them, definitely do that. And I am going to go up into this shape and add some dark lines up there. I'm going to start with my pinky purple again, or my reddish purple, whatever we're going to call that color. My paper is rippled. I'm just kind of holding it down a bit. I will iron this when I'm done. And yes, I'm holding my paintbrush almost more like a pen right now. I want to get some more of these branched ones as well. I really like that effect when they kind of branch off. I think that's really pretty. And I feel like sometimes I'm losing that and I'm just doing straight lines, but it's really pretty when they do have these little branches. It's kind of more natural looking. Again, I don't think these are actually real veins. I don't think that petals have actual veins in them, but they have the look of that. Maybe you guys can correct me on that. Okay, now I'm coming in with my water and I'm just sort of moistening things, softening a few places. I don't want to go overboard with my softening because I do really like what I just got. I just felt like, you know what, I think it's a little tiny bit harsher than I want it. So just kind of softening things up a little bit. And I do like a soft brush, again, as I mentioned, for something like this, just because if you have too firm a brush, you're going to end up like lifting too much as you do it. So you just want to kind of just gently move it around, but not really lift too much. I'm going to throw a little bit of line work right here. It really doesn't have that so much. It's actually kind of a little bit of a more vibrant purple there, but it's okay. I'm working with a bit of a more muted color today, and I'm okay with that, looking this muted. Now this petal does have the hard lines in it, but they're really behind the petal that's in front of it. You really can't see too much of these hard lines, so I'm not going to make too much of a deal of them. I'm just going to put a little bit of that reddish purple on there, blend it out, and call that good for this petal. All right, I think I like that. I don't know, I can always come back later and fix it if I don't. All right, why don't I work on this one? Here I go again. I keep grabbing my more reddish purple, so I guess maybe that's a better one to just work with. Maybe we don't need that muted one so much. You can use whatever purple you're feeling you're happiest with. And this is, again, almost where I'm doing that little bit of, I don't know, sometimes that little bit of a helicopter thing where I hover over my painting before I actually touch down to just really kind of calculate what I'm doing. So that's a good idea if you're ever, you know, maybe not quite as confident about where you're laying things down. Just kind of hover over, get your wrist movement working the way you want it to be working. Like just getting your movements correct can sometimes help when you actually get the paint on there. You're moving the way that you want to be moving. It sounds so silly, but it does seem to work. I'm kind of happy with that. I feel like these are a bit harsh, but again, as I did with the last one, I think, you know, when I was down working on this one, I think I'd rather just let it dry and then come in and just lightly take out just as much as I need to. I could probably do it right now, maybe, but I don't know, feel better just leaving it for a bit. Just gonna smooth this out a little bit. I feel like some of these are a bit harsh. Or maybe bold is the better word. I don't know. Not so crazy about what I did just there. And I went and grabbed my water brush to do that. That was kind of dumb. Smooth that out. Okay, let's leave that one alone before I make a bigger mess. Let's work on this pansy here. feeling a bit dry, so I have to keep dipping into my paint. And sometimes I'll even add a little bit of water to my brush. Like I'll dip my brush just directly into the water if I feel like, okay, I'm loaded with paint, but it's still too dry. It's just that sometimes I work with fairly dry paint. So it's like when I'm working in a situation like this where I'm wanting very fine details, my paint is quite concentrated. And it worked actually nicely that I had paint left from last time, so I didn't really have to moisten it much. So I was able to get some really, really rich, deep darks. However, if you're pulling it straight out of a palette that's pretty much dry, you may need to, throw a little bit of water on your brush as you're working, because if it's too dry, it can actually look a little bit, I don't know, rough edged, maybe that's the way to put it. Like your brush can actually come down and it can have a real dry brush effect, which not really after that, just after a more wet on dry effect. Okay, so again, I'm going to come in and just moisten things just enough to kind of blend them out. Because partly I want the softer edges on this one, because it is, again, as I've mentioned, on the other side of the painting, we are close to the edge of the painting, which means we don't want as much detail, or as stark a detail, or as high a contrast, but I still want them there. I don't want to skip this step. I just want to make sure that it's soft enough. Same thing here. I'm going to be blending these guys out because they're not this harsh, but there's definitely some lines here that I want to achieve. So that one was kind of weird, isn't it? Let's get this blended out. Again, working with some water to just get this softer. I think I'm happy with that. I don't know. Maybe I'll just cross the line through here. This is just looking a little bit of a weird, I don't know, V shape or something. Just soften it up a little bit. Is that better? Again, this is where you can take artistic license and decide where you like your little lines or veins, whatever they are, to be. Don't have to do what I'm doing. I always do say sometimes it's best to always best to look at a reference photo over someone else's work. Yes, you can see their areas they take artistic license, and that can be helpful, but you can also see where they kind of do things that are maybe not their favorite, and that can be unhelpful. For instance, you could follow me into some of my mistakes if you copy me. Everything I do exactly when I do it. I'm just not quite happy with the shape, but I can always reassess. Sometimes if you're not happy and you can get a little bit too focused on something, and you can sometimes, at least for me, not even know anymore if the thing is actually working or not. Sometimes I just have to take a little break from it and assess it later. It could be that later I don't even notice it. So I do say that's a good rule for yourself, is if you're struggling, just keep moving, move along to another shape, and then you can always reassess, and there's a chance you won't even notice whatever it was that was bugging you before. Okay, this one is a little bit more interesting because this is where I had that fixing I did earlier, and I'm not completely happy with it. So I'm going to come in first with a red purple, and maybe even more than what I have in my palette. Maybe I'm going to go just grab some quinacridone rose and kind of just throw a little bit of the quinacridone rose here with my purple. We'll see. I just feel like if I go directly with the purple, I have a feeling I won't be happy. Let's see what I can do here. I might just have to let this dry after I fix it. So I'm still just working wet on dry, and I'm going to drag these down, and then I will just use a little bit of water to kind of soften it as I come upwards, and we'll see how that dries. So using water now. Whoops, I'm not using my water brush anymore. Back to the water brush. I don't know if this is helpful for you guys or not. Even when I try and change brushes, I sometimes grab the wrong one for the wrong thing. Thinking I'm happier with that. I think I have to let that dry, so I probably will grab the hair dryer because I don't have too many other details that I can work on in the meantime. Actually, you know what? Since I'm kind of doing this fussy business again, I might throw a tiny little bit of orange right here. Just a tiny bit. just maybe even lift a bit. This is kind of a risk. If you don't want to take any risks, maybe just don't copy me. You can assess how things are working, and you have to assess how your painting's working, because it might be just fine in this area. You might have enough of your orangey color already here. So yeah, I'm coming in with a little bit of this kind of quinacridone rose color again. My quinacridone rose is a little bit dirty on my palette. It's not perfectly clean, just that will have an influence as well, depending on how clean things are that, you know, in your palette. Okay, I'm gonna just try and blend this out a little bit. Thinking I'm a little touch happier with that than I was. I might have to come in with a little bit more of my hard lines on top of that, but why don't we hit it with the hairdryer? I will be back in a few minutes. All right, so I went ahead and dried it, and now I'm just going to come in with my final touches of our wet on dry with my purple and get these lines working over here. Things get really dark in this corner over here. You can pretty much barely even differentiate the lines from the darkness of the pansy. So just go ahead and throw some on there and then take a minute to reassess it. Getting a little bit of a weird movement happening there. Okay, let's go over here. Sometimes I'm almost interchangeably picking up that muted purple and the reddish purple. So. And there isn't a right or wrong. You can just do what you feel you like. It's really just a matter of getting these dark and visible. And you can kind of just go based on how it's working on your painting, especially if you chose colors that were a little bit more pink than mine, then yeah, you might be working with more pinks in this stage too. Or I should say more reds. I don't know why I tend to call that quinacridone rose pink because it looks pinky to me, but it's my red. It almost looks a little bit too stripey, hey? I'm going to soften it a bit with water. Putting a touch more water on my brush, a little bit wetter than I've been working, just to kind of really get these blended out at the bottom, because I don't know, they were irritating me with how harsh they were. Might even do a little bit of that over here, just because it is very dark here, so this darkness can just blend around a little bit and get filled in a touch more. I think I'm mostly happy with that. I don't know. This one section here is irritating, but it's kind of what I did on my last layer. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and put a few more lines and try and balance things out. It's just this shape, the two sides are really not looking symmetrical enough. These have to be a little bit more similar. You don't have to be super symmetrical. I just think it's a little bit extreme, the difference between these two. I think that's improving already. I'm going to come in and soften things in a sec. Not sure if I like that right there. I'm gonna use my firmer brush. Again, I always use a cheap brush for this, but I'm just gonna rub it a little bit. Oh yeah, that's coming out. I think I'm happier. Alrighty, where else do I need to go? I have to go over here and finish up this one a little bit, just because I came in and did my little orange thing there. It's almost disappearing. I grab more of a reddish color as I work here. I've still got my purple on my brush, but I've dipped into my quinacridone rose. Try and get things to be just a little bit more on the red side. And now my water, try and blend that out. I think that's better. I've definitely lost some of my yellow compared to what I would like, but I'm not sure if I need or want to lift it out. I could lift a little bit of that red out and get more of my yellow back. It's kind of seems a touch scary to me to do that at this stage, but that's even better, maybe like that. The shape has changed a bit. Maybe I can just lift it just a sec. Again, I'm being super persnickety. Sometimes I'm not always this persnickety. Some people are more perfectionist than me and some are less. So some of you will probably say, yeah, you should fix that. I'm just going to call that good. It's not perfect, but I better not touch that anymore. I think I'm going to come in with my water brush and just soften this a little bit. So this is my softer brush. I don't want to really lift, but I just want to maybe gently soften the edges of these. Just, okay, maybe lift them a little bit. Ooh, no, that's not working very well. Just kind of smearing it. Okay, just a little bit, just lift it so ever so slightly. It's kind of smearing. We'll see how it behaves as it dries. If you don't mind how harsh those were, you might just want to leave them be, because adding water at this stage is kind of making them move around a little bit. I'm just experimenting here. Softening them ever so slightly with my water brush, but it's scary at this stage. You might just want to leave them be. I think I should leave them be. The other thing I'm going to do before I move on to the next step is just kind of come in here with my little water lifting brush. And there's a few spots where I've got kind of, I don't know, white edges that maybe I could have just had a little bit of smoother transition. If you want to do this, you can. Maybe you got it just how you want it in the first place. I'm just going to go ahead and there's a little splatter here. I'll try and clean it up. Again, I'm not trying to do anything too radical. I just want to just see if there's anything I want to clean up. You can do that with your lifting brush. So I kind of scrub and then I just kind of just let it blend, because there's probably a tiny bit of pigment that I've kind of moved around, and I just want to let that kind of have a smooth blending. Now I'm going to go ahead and just mix up a little bit of green. I might even have a green I'm happy with. This is for the centers of our flowers. I actually think this green I have here is okay. It would have been made from my Hansa Yellow Deep, my Phthalo Blue, and a tiny bit of red is what I'm thinking, because I don't very often grab the ultramarine blue, but I'm just going to test it quick. And that's not a bad color. I might need it to be more concentrated. You know what? I'm just going to throw a little bit more yellow in there, maybe even a little bit more blue. I'll see. Let's start with, well, it's kind of scary to throw in that old phthalo blue because it's so concentrated. You don't want much of it. Let's go with that. These are just for the centers. We're going to go ahead and fuss around at our greens a little bit more when we go to do our leaves. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just paint the centers of these green. And I'll use a bit of water to kind of get one side to be a little bit lighter than the other, one side darker. So I've got my water brush again, and I'm going to blend that around. And I'll probably go a little bit darker with the green at the top. I know in the reference you can see more the little tiny parts of the center of the pansies, but I want to just keep it simple and go with the green. If you want to, you know, do more detail, you can. But a lot of times with pansies, you can really just mainly see kind of this green look in the centers, but do what you would like to do. So combination of my green and my water. Now I'm going to put a tiny bit up here. This one you really can't see a whole lot. So I'm just going to leave that be like that. Again, I'm going to put more green kind of at the tip of this. And then I'll use my water brush and just kind of fade things out a bit. Put a little bit more green. I can always come back in if I need to with a darker green as well, if I feel like I'm, you know, getting not maybe quite deep and dark enough in that little hole there. Let's do a little bit more of the same thing down here. And I can always add a shadow too, but why don't we just go ahead and drop a tiny bit. I happen to have some dark green here that's made from something else. You could easily just do the same thing to the green you have here, or just throw a little bit of your green that you already have made into another well, and then just put a little bit more of the blue and the red, and that'll help get it darker. It's basically the same thing, just with less yellow. And I'm just going to go around and just dot a teeny weeny little bit, kind of, like I say, kind of more the tip of this is where I feel like it's the darkest. Again, just, you can blend it around if you need to with a damp brush. And we can get some shadows going in these shapes as well, but I'm going to let that dry, and we can always assess the shadows later. You know what? I'm going to change the shape of this a little bit. Okay, that was my dark green. I'm going to put a little bit of light green. Took a little artistic license, and I think I kind of changed the shape of this a little bit, but yeah, I went overboard there. Let's just lift that out a bit. I'm going to just let that dry, and then like I say, I can come back and assess if I want to do anything else to the centers after. Why don't we go ahead and mix up a slight shadow color that we can put around the pansies. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got a bit of yellow here. I think I'm just going to add to it, add a little more yellow. I'm kind of thinking I'm aiming for something that's just a slightly, I don't know if I want to say a muddy yellow, but I'm going to add a little bit of red to it as well. I'll see if this color is going to do the trick. I'm just grabbing my brush that I have been using for water, and I'm going to just use it to test. I'm not, like I say, I'm not even sure. I'm going to just dab my brush off so it's not too wet. I'm not even sure if this is the color I'm after. I'm just wanting something in this section here, because you can see there's like a shadow being cast down from, you know, this petal's kind of casting its shadow over the center of the pansy. And this is kind of just a little bit of an extra. It's not essential that you do this, but just thought, why don't we just add something? Just add a little touch to this. I'm not really happy with the center of this one. I might come in and tweak it more after, but let's just get that shadow color on here, because that shadow is kind of getting cast kind of consistently in the same sort of shape over all of these pansies. Same thing over here. This one's not as noticeable. I think this shape is just, yeah, let's just go with that. And we'll see when it dries. I can always come back in with a little bit more green if we kind of lose our greens, but I feel like it needed a bit of a shadow. And my shapes are not 100% perfect, but I'm going to call that good. And then next time we will get our leaves and background on here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this just fully comes together. I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.